Smith or something. He said, where there's smoke, there's food. So we called them, somebody in our squadron named Food Fighters. And these lights we'd see them in the sky at night. They'd follow the planes around. And I had a little article in my history here about the different ones saw. And everybody got interested in it. They send people from Washington. We'd take them in a plane and they'd see us, but we never heard well, they didn't know what they were either. They think they're extraterrestrial objects, but who knows? They didn't scare you or anything like that. You couldn't pick them up on your radar.
Did they just jet really quick?
Well, no, they'd be there and you'd be flying. They'd be ones I saw was flying off my wing way out here, and then you'd try to pick them up on radar. You turn towards them, they'd be gone. Some of them saw red lights, and some of them red and green lights. Nobody ever explained it there.
Okay. I'm going to get my drink because I'm starting to cough.
All right. Okay.
Okay, we're interviewing today at the United States Air Force Museum from the Mary L. Cook Public Library in Waynesville, Ohio. Today is November 5th, 2002. We'll have you begin by telling us your name and your rank and the time that you served.
My name is Harold F. Augspurger, and I served from 1941 to 1946, and the highest rank I received was Lieutenant Colonel.
Okay. And where did you serve?
Well, I served a little time in the United States, Pacific Patrol, and not very much. Then I went to night fighter school, and then I was sent to Europe, England, and trained there, and Africa, and up to all Europe until the end of the war in Germany.
And what were the circumstances when you joined the service? Were you enlisted?
I was drafted, like everybody, right out of college.
And where did you go to college?
Where? Otterbein College, Westerville, Ohio. And I graduated in 41, and of course I got drafted immediately. I think I graduated on a Sunday, and I was a ground soldier in about 5 days.
And then what did you start with? You went to basic where?
Out in California, Roberts, Camp Roberts, and I had to take my 13 weeks basic training.
And then after you were there, you were sent to what type of schooling?
Well, when I was there, I went down, took my physical to be a pilot, and I passed it, but then I went to, I still didn't get out. I had to wait for a call to go to pilot training school.
So you stayed there in California during?
No, I went up to, I got signed with Arkansas National Guard, and little story that they were on their way, if you want to, they were on their way up in Washington, and they were in the staging area up there at the time to go to Alaska, and so when I got there, I found out they were going to Alaska, and I thought, boy, I'd never get out of it to go back to flying school because I hadn't heard from them yet. And then I got a letter around the 1st of January to go down to California to flying school. Well, what happened, like everybody knows now, December the 7th, they, of course, Pearl Harbor. And here I was there, and they froze all transfers. I couldn't transfer out. I thought, my gosh, I get this close to going to flying school, and now I can't transfer to them. But the cooler heads figured it out in about a week or so's time, and they said the Air Corps needed us worse than the ground troops in Alaska, so I did. Then I went back to California, flying school there.
And about how long of a time period did that take?
You mean in flying school? Where our class went through the fastest of any class of pilots, and it took us just 6 months. The ones before us was a little bit more than 6, and every since that time was a lot longer. I mean, not a lot longer, kept getting longer and longer as they got more people.
And when you came out of flight school, what were you qualified to do?
I was twin engine, could be a twin engine pilot.
And what was your assignment?
Well, from there I went to, I believe it was Fresno, and then I flew Lockheed Hudson's on a submarine patrol out over the Pacific for a very short time. They were just, I think, stalling us out someplace till they got the night flying schools ready to go. And then they transferred me, I came through, and I went to Orlando, Florida, which was the first night fighter school.
So you were in the first night fighter school?
First class of them.
Okay, and that's the one that they call the bow fighter?
Well, when, no, at that time in Florida we were flying P-70s,
Okay.
which was an A-20 painted black with radar on it.
Okay, and then about how many were in your first class there for the night fighter school?
Oh gosh, I don't know whether I can answer that or not, but there, you know, it's about, to a squadron there's about, you know, we have about 15 to 20 pilots in a squadron and a couple, 4 squadrons of us there, so, but, you know, 75, 80 people probably in the first class.
And how was this training going to be different from everything that had gone before?
Well, nobody, back in those days, nobody liked to fly at night particularly. It was kind of dangerous. And, I don't know why they picked us to go to that. Maybe we had good instrument rating, training in school. Maybe we did a better job. Or maybe they just found a bunch of dumb guys that liked to, that didn't have sense enough not to know to fly at night. But anyway, that's what we took. It was the first radar, too. It was very highly secret at the time. And so it was like the stealth fighter was there. You know, you had, whenever, if we flew off base, which was very seldom, we weren't allowed to, you had to take a guard along to guard the airplane.
So what did your family think you were doing?
So I was flying airplanes.
That was it?
Yeah. That's all.
Okay.
We didn't talk about it at all because it was so new to everybody. Now the British had been doing it for, you know, because they've been in the war for a couple of years before that. So that, you know.
And so the advantage of having the night fighters was mainly the element of surprise, or?
Well, it's been able to intercept airplanes at night. The bow fighter, if we went to England and to train with them, not to train with them, but to learn to fly the bow fighter, we spent about 3 months there. And it was a plane that actually saved the Battle of Britain there, because they were getting bombed to death over there early on, and the Spitfires and the Hurricanes pretty well put a stop to that. But then the Germans started bombing at night, and they had their radar going before we had ours going. We had it, but we wasn't that great. And so they put it on a bow fighter over there, and they were able to shoot enough planes down that the Germans decided it wasn't very good even flying over there at night, so they start sending the V-1s and the V-2, the bomber, the guide bombs over.
Can you talk a little bit about how the plane was made or how it was laid out?
Well, it's a twin-engine airplane, pretty good-sized airplane, but not like the fighters are today. We have one in the museum now here, and we dedicated it here a couple of months ago. It had the most firepower on it than any fighter plane at the time. We had 4 20mm cannons and 6 machine guns on it. They were in the wings, and the cannons were in the body of it. And it had, well, it had a radar operator riding in the back, just 2-place plane. Single pilot and a radar operator. He rode in the back, but he had his little scope back there. He could, tell us where we are in the air.
Did you have an advantage over the distance you were allowed to fly with this plane over earlier planes, or was it about the same?
Oh, it was just an average plane. It had a little bit longer than a day fighter did, more gas. Different kind of an operation than a day fighter. I don't know how familiar you are with night fighting.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about what is different about it?
Well, what would happen is our job was to go up, and they had huge radar sets on the ground. They've had those for quite a while, but the problem was to get one small enough to go in an airplane. Well, when they finally got that, we would patrol a lot over harbors and any place that Germans were coming through with their bombers. That was our job, to protect the harbors, mostly early in the war. Well, the ground control would put us up in the air on a interceptive course within a couple miles of the plane, and by that time we were able to pick them up on our radar. And then our radar operator would tell us, you know, where to go. Go up, go down, go right, go left, speed up until we could get close enough to see what the plane was. And we had to identify it before we were allowed to shoot it down. That's the general gist of it there.
You had to have a visual identification.
Had a visual contact, and we had a lot to learn. We had to learn the silhouettes of planes, and we had to learn, could tell by the exhaust stacks coming out which kind of a plane it was. We learned that.
Can you remember your first mission up in one of those?
Oh, I guess, well, we were, when we were training there a little bit, fly the plane, we went up into Scotland, but we didn't have any interceptions up there. And then in Africa, the stuff was crude then. I didn't happen to shoot any planes down in Africa. I did later on. But, first mission I went into, just fly at night, you know, get back in. That was kind of hairy at times. We'd fly out of in Africa, come in, and they'd have like no runway lights. They'd have one on the end of the field, one in the middle of the field, and one on the far end, and you had to land at night in the dark with that. And then finally we got portable lights put up, and sometimes early on, if you come in to land it, you just landed and rolling down a runway, 60, 70 mile an hour, and they'd turn the lights out on you because they didn't want to keep them lit long enough for Germans to spot the fields. And then the longer it went, boy, the safer that part got.
So your early part of flying, the night flights were mainly over Germany, England, that area?
Well, yeah, it was over Italy. Our first job was down Bizerta in Africa, fly over that. So they got the Germans out of Africa, and that we got there just as they had them out, and they had to give up the ports along with the Germans. So our Navy moved in on them right away, so it was protecting those ports down there. And we went up through Sicily and into Italy as well as around Naples. We flew that, flew over Anzio, and then finally had the landing there a lot. It's mostly you go up there and ride for about 2-hour missions, and a lot of times you'd get vectored on by the ground control, but our stuff was kind of crude then, and sometimes you'd get a contact and close in, but you never got a real visual on there. But we got some. Our squadron shot down the first plane over the Mediterranean. Our squadron, my squadron there, we lost our first crew, you know, to being shot down. They had them out in the daytime, and the German 190s or 109s at the time jumped them. And of course, it wasn't any plane to be in combat with a day fighter. So.
As far as a typical day, you would probably get up and get your assignment, and you said you go out and fly for a couple of hours.
Yeah. We'd have 3 or 4, depends on the length of the night, but say 4 crews on a night, you had a 2-hour trip. And you'd go down, and you'd have 1 flight in the air, and you'd have 1 flight on alert down. And that was the case. One of them had to come back. You'd send the second one off right away to keep the area covered. By that time, you had your 3rd crew would have to be there. But you flew about every schedule, if everything worked right, about every 3 nights.
Well, tell me about some of the highlights of your career.
Oh, you want to hear it? Well, my biggest thing that caused me to come today is I shot down a Focke-Wulf 200. I was up in Dijon, France at the time. the general, I was CO of the squadron at that time, and the general called me in. See, in our organization, there's squadrons, there's groups, and there's wings. So we don't have any groups. We're just lone squadrons all by ourselves out there. I think around the world there's only 18 squadrons of us. But the general called in one night, called me over one day and said, there's a plane flying for Berlin to Spain, big plane. We're picking it up, going across there once a week or something like that. He said, I want you to get up and shoot that plane down, if you can. And I said, well, I'll get you somebody in the squadron to go up and do it, because the guys that like to fly and wanted to get up there and do it, why, when their turn was up, they wanted their turn, you know. And some of them were chicken, and they didn't want to go up at all, so the guys that wanted to had filled in for them. But anyway, he said that. I said, I'll get you somebody to do it. And he said, I don't want somebody to do it, I want you to go do it. And why is the best thing he could have said, because I could go back and tell my guys, so it's not your turn tonight, it's going to be my turn. So it was highly secret. And usually you hear the ground controller evacuate you, you know, you've got a bogey at 10,000 feet, that's most of the time about where they used to fly then. Coming from here, and he's doing so much miles, and he'd direct you until he got you in the right position. And so little things like that could all go wrong. I mean, like I say, it was ancient stuff we were using, and didn't always keep it. Some of the guys that didn't like to fly would find fault with the plane. And that night, we had the job to do. Everything worked just perfect. I mean, the radio worked great. Radar worked great, the plane worked great, everything must just came out that way. But it was real secret. They wouldn't say, close 1,000 feet, he's 10,000 feet in front of you now, or this or that. And I can't recall for the life of me. I mean, I'm getting old enough, I can't remember anything anymore. But I can't remember what the code was. I mean, what we did for to direct us without saying any words, and even between me and my radar operator, extended to that, he could direct me, but we never said anything that the Germans could pick up on their radios, knowing us follow. Anyway, we shot down this big plane, and it landed pretty close, or crashed pretty close to the airbase in Dijon over on. And all the guys, not all the guys, but a lot of guys jumped in cars and went over to see the wreck. And they found all these people there, and they're all wealthy. Could have been, must have been wealthy or high, the monthly monks. They all had these long leather coats on, military people, dressed like $1 million, all that. It was people escaping out of Berlin to go to Spain. That's what it was all about. Plus all kind of documents strewn around here. And so, we shot it down, and then for that I got the Distinguished Flying Cross. And the French came in and gave me the Croix de Guerre, which is their third highest thing. And kissed me on both cheeks, and I said, I'm going to keep my eye on that guy, But that's all was ever said about it. And I don't know, since I've gotten older and I've been working out here at the base here, and I got to thinking, nobody ever told what was on the plane. But I know one thing for sure, they don't give you a DFC for shooting down just an airplane.
What is the criteria for getting a distinguished?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I mean, well, it's written down someplace. But it's more than just shooting an airplane down, or they'd have given $1 million on the way, and they didn't do that. It's a real honor to have it. I mean. But I think our ground troops, the intelligence moved in on that. And since that time, I've had some conversation with a German lady, and it turned out that she was somebody from Michigan, one guy from Indiana. A week or two later, had the same story. They said they have a German friend that comes over in the area and visits, and she has heard that but my name was the person that shot it down. She called me on the phone. This guy said that she wanted to talk to me, and I said, well, okay. We'll tell her when she's there. Well, give me a call on the phone. Well, he said, well, she's not here now, but she'll call you from Germany, and she did. And she said she was 10 years old when it happened, that her father was the radio operator on this German plane, and they didn't know exactly where it ever went down. And could I tell them? I said, oh, no, I wasn't there where it crashed. I can tell you about where in the area. Well, so we had some, good conversation, and then she sent me a bunch of material from the Luftwaffe intelligence thing, and they didn't know where it was. They didn't tell, I mean, I know, they know it was in France, and they didn't get there, but I think our troops got there first, and our intelligence got there first. And all these papers and stuff had to be something very important, but they never told us what it was, and the German never told their people what it was about the plane. All they told them it was flying from Berlin, they said to Stuttgart to that was kind of interesting to see that they kept it a total secret, and we keep it a total secret. And somebody knows someplace what it is, and it's interested me enough now that when I think about it, that I'd like to go down to Maxwell or get some correspondence with them and see if they have some record of that, and what the end result was, who was on the plane. My wife, she was in a Red Cross overseas. She serviced the Air Force Base in England and followed the troops on up through Germany, tank group. But she said, oh, it's probably Hitler who might have been on the plane. And I said, no, I don't think so. I think they've documented that well enough. He got killed in the bunker. But as somebody, or several people, or a certain amount of writing documents that were on that plane that they wanted to get rid of. And they don't want, unfortunately, whatever happened, they don't want their own people to know about it either. So that's been interesting, and that just sort of makes a thing I don't know policy about.
And then I see that you've had 2 Purple Hearts.
Yeah.
Would you care to tell us how that happened?
Yeah, it all. After towards the end of the war, end of the war there, they the Germans weren't flying very many planes over, so as far as going up at night and patrolling for them, we did that too, but it wasn't any planes flying very much. So our job then was to go in at night and we called it intruder missions, and you flew just around in Germany and shot anything you saw. Did that at night. It was you'd shoot up airplanes, trains, convoys, and all this. And well, anyway, I was on a mission like that. One night, I don't know, we probably shot up a few things around, and it was all over with. And we started back out of Germany, and I got to somewhere near the lines, close, and the Germans opened up fire on me, and they hit me, and so I was going to make I thought an intelligent move, so I made a real sharp turn out to get out of it, and all I did was turn down the lines. Well, the Germans were shooting at me on this side, and the Americans were shooting at me from the other side, and they were hitting me really good, and they shot out one engine, and a boat fighter wouldn't fly very good on one engine, especially the ones we had. So I tried to make it back to the base on one engine, and it was losing altitude and getting lower and lower. I just got to the base, and I had to get to the base because all the force and stuff was out there, and I just had to make it. So I kept giving the good engine more power and power. Well, finally, that engine wants to get ahead, and I just got it on the end of the field and took out across the field. Of course, when they shot at me, the little red-hot bullets were flying through the cockpit, bouncing off everything, and one of them went across my leg and hit me in the leg. It's not bad, but it hit me. Then the next morning I go out, see where the plane ended up crashing. It just crashed on the field. And I don't know whether you're familiar with what Pierce planking is or not. It's long, big, long, sheets of steel, probably as long as that table over there, not quite as long. And they're about 2 feet wide. And they join them together and make runways out of them. Something hard to tell you. Well, the engineers had been there a couple days or so before, and they piled all this stuff up in piles, this metal. I mean, it was big, huge piles, maybe 8-10 feet high. Our plane had slid across the end of the runway, across the field, and went right in between all these big piles of them like that. And there's no way in the world you could do that, live through that. I mean, you'd had to hit one of those. You couldn't have, in the daytime, you couldn't have drove the thing in there and done that. So we were just lucky there. And another time on a transmission coming out, we shot up whatever we see there. Got caught in broad spoons one time, but got out of those without losing the wings off the plane. It was coming out, saw a tank sitting down there. It was too low to get down, and we had to fly around about 500 feet, 1,000 feet at night, so you'd have enough to put the nose down, and it wouldn't be dumb to try to take a tank on. But it was a gunner. I could see a machine gunner on the front of the tank, and he fired at me. And I knew he hit me, but he did. And he hit the right end, and so we were flying all back and got out of Germany there, I guess, and began to see the oil pressure dropping off on the engine, so I knew it had been hit. And so I said, let's climb up as high as we can get while it's still running. So we went up altitude, I can't remember now, high enough, because I had some hills to get over to get back home. I mean, they weren't mountains, but they were high, big rolling hills. And we got about, I'd say, into those pretty good. We kept losing altitude, I said, we can't make it over. So let's turn back where the ground's a little bit lower, and that give us a little bit more out, we'll bail out back there. Well, standard procedure, if you had a controlled bailout, we had the radar operator would come up in front and open my door, which was over the back seat and down at the bottom, and then he'd get out first, and then I'd keep it over. Well, he crawled up there, and so I unfastened my safety belt and all that, ready to go, and he fussed around. Finally, he said, I can't get the door open. So I said, well, you go back and get out your door. He had one back there, and parachute out. I got no choice. I got to ride it in on the ground. I can't get out. I could hit the top, but by that time it was getting so low. So he bailed out, and his chute worked, everything, but I had to belly it in. And just at night, you don't know what's there. It could be these big stone fences, it could be stumps, it could be rough ground, it could be anything. But here I didn't have any seat belt anymore. So I bellied it in there, and I busted my head open there on that, and hurt my arm and all that. But I crawled out the top of it then, and got out. And I don't know, I was dazed at the time. I don't know what happened, but I don't know how long I sat there, out there, just getting my wits together. And pretty soon he came driving up in a 2.5-ton truck to the plane there. And they picked him up, and I saw the chute. He must have seen me go down. It must have been fairly close to where it was. I said how low I was and how low he was to bail out. But, so that time once again it busted me all open, another purple heart. I don't remember when they took us back to the base, which was still quite a ways away, got us back here, but I don't remember. I mean, after a day or so, I kind of got my wits back together again. That's my big experiences of anything, and then no hero stuff to that. It's just facts, and he's trying to save your life, that's all. So that's my experiences there with that.
And then after all of this, did you go back to flying?
Oh, yeah.
For several years, several months? How?
Oh, I don't know. That was close to the end of the war. I flew back home. I stayed over in Germany for a year with my squadron there. One squadron had to stay over, and I picked mine. And I didn't have to stay. I mean, I had enough flying time. Matter of fact, I came back about halfway through my time over there with enough hours to, well, ours was, well, you could call them missions, but ours were so many hours. It's a lot more than what the guys, when they had to fly 10 hours and then they had to fly 20, missions to get back. We had to fly 50 patrols or so. But they gave it for an air medal, and I had an air medal in a cluster or so on it because I'd flown over 100 of them. And then they sent me home one time for a 30-day rest. Had an opportunity at that time to stay home if I wanted to. Had my choice, either go back or stay home. I said, I'll go back. When I went back, that's when I became CO of the squadron on that, because the other guy who was CO got sick and had to go home.
So when you entered, did you enter as a lieutenant?
I entered in the private.
Okay. Because I remember you said you graduated from Otterbein, correct?
Yeah.
So, and then you had to go to, did you go to officers training?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a private till after I got, private first class, when I got assigned to the other group there, I don't know what the Arkansas National Guard is, but it was. I mean, I know, they were just Arkansas National Guard, and they sent me in the intelligence corps at the time up with them, and I guess because I must have been the only one that had a college education, I wasn't because I knew so much.
And then, now, when you got out of the service, did you return back to your hometown, or?
I left that and I got out in '46 at the end of the year, and I applied to go to dental school. So I went to come back to Ohio State to go to dental school. My wife always said, "Why did you go to dental school? Why did you pick that?" I always liked to work with my hands. And what had happened, I was at Williams Field at the time, and I had a dental appointment. I went out, had my teeth worked on that day, and I came home. Said, "I know what I'm going to do." And she said, "What's that?" "I'm going to be a dentist." So, a dentist, why are you going to do that? I said, "If that dumb SOB can be a dentist, so can I." So I went back and went to dental school then.
So that's what you did in civilian life?
Yeah, I was 50 years of it.
Okay. And now, when did you become married? Was that after you got home?
Yeah, when I got home, 46 there.
And then you've lived in this general area most of your life?
In Ohio, yeah. Up to Westerville.
Okay.
Went to Ohio State, and then after I graduated, we came back to Dayton, or not back to Dayton, because my home Middletown was.
Did you do any reserve or anything
No.
after that? You were just the active?
Never flew after I got out. I just figured it didn't go with what helping being a dentist. I wish I had it, but I didn't. I love to fly airplanes, but I trusted the guys and my mechanics and all that, my crew chiefs, during the war, and I thought, well, the weekend soldiers is not the greatest. They're a fantastic group, though, now, the Reserve and National Guard is, I think. They're really dedicated people. At that time, I wasn't so sure that they were. So I just quit flying altogether.
What do you think about your military experience?
Oh, that was wonderful. I almost stayed in.
Did you?
Yeah. I had the choice there. I could have stayed. I had a couple of, not to brag about, I was kind of a couple generals, fair-haired boy. That helps to stay in. They'd give me a regular commission. And I finally decided, no, I'm not. I made my choice there.
What do you think about, do you think mandatory military experience would be a good thing?
Mandatory?
Mm-hmm.
I do. Yeah, I really think it. Just.
What does it do for a young person?
Well, first thing, it teaches to be part of the group and not just do your own thing. you do what they tell you to do. I mean, if you don't like it, you do it. If you don't like to go flying on a mission, get shot at, you know, you got no choice. Well, some of the guys think up some excuse not to go, but you did, you know, you did. And you get a close feeling to the other people. Like I say, I had close feelings to my crews and stuff like that. We're night fighters is really a close, tight.
You still get together?
Yeah, we just had 4 squadrons, the first 4 squadrons I was chairman since I'm living in town here, on the dedication of the boat fighter. So we're pretty close. I think I'd read down there, I worked down here, volunteered down here, and reading one of the signs there, they taught 91,000 pilots between 1941 and 1945, had many trained pilots. And the night fighters, as I understand it, I wouldn't bet my life on it exactly, but it makes sense, the numbers of the squadrons we had. They only had 452 guys trained to be night fighters out of 91,000. That's pretty close, you know, pretty close group of people that had the same experiences.
What, after that group, what, was there a similar aircraft that kind of took over that role?
Yeah, they they converted them into all-weather fighter, yeah. They put radar on, the F-86 and F-94, F-84 and F-94, I guess. Put an extra seat in it, so radar operator.
Is there anything that we've overlooked today while we're
I don't know. There's no, if you hunt a hero, you didn't find the hero. You just found the guy that got caught up in it. That's for sure.
Okay. If there's nothing else that you'd like to add, then
I have nothing more I'd say about it. It was a good experience and everything.
okay. Well, thank you very much
Okay.
for your time today.
I hope a little bit will go. I don't know. Whatever. Just a story.